I haven't visited the Hout. I've driven through Hout Bay a couple of times in the last couple of years, but it's not a place that I go to for all sorts of reasons. None of them because I don't like Hout Bay. So I can't remember the last time I was anywhere near the Hout Bay harbour, but it's got to be 5, 7, 8 years ago. It's got to be that long ago. And so I was reading through stories on various websites earlier today, thinking, what can I talk about on the radio this afternoon, this week? And I came across Don Pinnock's story about the visit of the Environmental Minister, Dion George, to the Hout Bay Harbour on the last day of April. So that is now 3 weeks ago. And I was struck by what people who live and work, who kind of work at and live near the Hout Bay Harbour, how strong were their views on how bad it is. One of them joins us now, Justin Strong, chairman of the Hout Bay Harbour Tenants Association and the CEO of Snoekies. Hello, Justin.
Hi, John.
Look, I mean, I've been speaking to a couple of people at work who live in the area, and they say, yeah, absolutely, it's horrible. And I mentioned earlier on the radio that I was going to be talking about this, and lots of WhatsApp saying, John, you've got no idea how bad it is. And so for people like me who are unaware of this, how bad is it?
Look, it's like I shared with the Minister of Forestries, Fisheries and Environmental Affairs. It's disgusting. It's absolutely shocking that his department, who manages the harbour, and the landowner, which is the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, have left the harbour essentially unattended to for my tenure there as a custodian of Snoekies, which is in the order of about 15 years. And so it's very disheartening to see what used to be one of the top 10 tourist attractions in Cape Town just being left to essentially rack and ruin.
Left by whom? The authorities. Who are the authorities in this case? I mean, are we talking about individual responsibility or individual abdication of responsibility, or are we talking about something more systemic, more structural?
Well, since I've been a custodian of the Snoekies brand, we're the third generation of custodians. We've been through 4 ministers. The previous President Zuma and now the current President Cyril. And so, there seems to be a complete change of focus, or each minister wants to put their signature on the harbour. But essentially, a very expensive framework was agreed to by the department, and that was a decade ago. And since that spatial framework, which is what the document was called, was approved by the ministers and all the various departments, nothing has been done. And what we find as tenants in the harbour is that the Departments of Public Works and Infrastructure and the Department of Forestries, Fisheries and Environmental Affairs, they both almost hide behind each other, or even as Minister Dion George shared with us a few weeks ago, he doesn't even know, for example, whose role it is to take care of the ablution facilities for the members of public. So it's just a question of finding out, and you as much as I'd like to know, whom is the responsible party, whose desk does it fall on for each and every task that needs to be done in the harbour. And to date, we don't have any answers on that, but we received an undertaking from Minister George that he would come back to us with very specific action plan, and we look forward to that. And I think essentially what's shared between the communities of Imazama, Yetu, Hungberg, because they impact us just as much as tenants, and all interested parties is, we're losing hope. And as you know, hope deferred makes the heart grow sick. And I think the harbour's looking sick, the tenants are sick, the communities are in desperate need of employment. And what is frustrating for me as a businessman is if I brought in the private sector, decisions would be made in weeks, quotes would be signed off in months, and work would be underway. And essentially, we've watched nothing happen for a decade. And this is the most frustrating and disheartening aspect for me as a business owner and a custodian of essentially what was the first tenant for the government in the harbour. Since 1950, we've had an unbroken lease, Snoekies.
Justin, one hopes that because historically it might have been at least part of the reason was that there was a lack of alignment between the city authorities and the national authorities, because the city for much of the last 30 years has been run by the DA, either in collaboration with other parties or more latterly by itself, and the minister would have been an ANC appointee. And whether deliberately or through the natural course of events, nothing got done because nobody was on the same page. But now with the DA minister and a DA mayor, one hopes that Dion George and Jordan Hill Lewis might get together and say, right, let's work this out. Who does what? Let's make this a crown jewel again as part of Cape Town's tourism offerings.
Yeah, you're quite right. I think the word that I would use would be political will. I don't think, this is my opinion, that there's been a political will. I think the government's been focusing more on where there's massive employment opportunities, and the 12, soon to be 13 small proclaimed harbours are not massive employment opportunities in terms of national. I think the mines and businesses like that are huge. But for the Hungberg and Imazama communities in the Hout Bay Valley, they're massive employment opportunities. We worked out, the tenants and myself worked out that there's probably 1,000 new permanent job opportunities sitting, just waiting for the grabs in Hout Bay Harbour. And you also need to put into that mix, the mayor, of course, and the Minister of DFFE, and also Dean McPherson, the newly appointed Minister of the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, because they're the landowners.
Yeah.
Minister George is essentially in charge of the harbour master, and it falls under the management of the harbour. But our leases lie with Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, which is Mr. McPherson. So we have to get all three of them. The city supplies water, electricity, services, roads to the harbour. So the mayor needs to come on board. The harbour is operated by the Department of Forestry, Fisheries, Environment, and then the landowner is Public Works Infrastructure. So essentially we fall underneath three different powerful bodies, and to date I don't think they've sat in the room together with affected parties and come up with a plan. It's very frustrating. We've been operating on a month-to-month lease, if your listeners can believe this in yourself, for 3 years on one of our leases and 6 years on another 2 leases. One of our members has been waiting for a lease and has been on month-to-month for 14 years. Now, how do you possibly operate a successful business on a month-to-month time frame? You can't.
Justin, that's a very, very powerful depiction of a very, very untenable situation. Let's hope that those 3 individuals put the collective might of the departments they head together and fix the issue. Justin Strong, Chairman of the Hout Bay Harbour Tenants Association and the CEO, the custodian, as he kept referring to it, of the Snoekies brand.